This podcast is for informational and discussion purposes only. All individuals are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law.
As August slipped into September of 1995, the quiet town of Polk, Kentucky was anything but calm. Under the cover of darkness, the FBI and Kentucky State Police surrounded a remote trailer, zeroing in on a man they believed was responsible for the chilling disappearance of 23-year-old Heather Teague just 4 days earlier. You see, early in the investigation, law enforcement received a tip in a rather unusual way. According to the Kentucky State Police, someone had actually witnessed Heather's abduction as it happened. A local homeowner and telescope enthusiast who often watches wildlife and people visiting the beach across the river. Well, on the day that Heather Teague went missing, this man happened to be looking through his telescope at the adjacent beach across the Ohio River when he saw a bearded man with wild hair emerge from the tree line at Newburgh Beach, grab Heather, who was sunbathing, and drag her back into the woods. There he was, casually looking out of a telescope, and this happens. He can't do anything about it because he's on the other side of the river. Now, the police, they released sketches of the suspect that the witness described. And sure enough, the description looked strikingly similar to Marvin Ray Dill's driver's license photo. So, despite Marvin's attorney, William Polk, warning KSP to wait to approach Marvin during daylight hours, even offering to speak to Marvin first, law enforcement went ahead with their plans, insisting that undertaking the task in the daylight could put the officers' lives at risk. They closed in on their suspect, approached his trailer, and in the early hours of September 1st, 1995, it was confirmed that Marvin would no longer be a threat to anyone, being that he was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
But where was Heather? And how did a man who had been clean-shaven be mistaken for someone with bushy hair and a beard?
Hey, Crime Salad listeners. So today, Ricky and I will be covering the case of Heather Teague's disappearance in hopes of bringing more attention to the battle that Heather's mother, Sarah Teague, has been fighting in honor of her daughter ever since the young woman went missing 30 years ago. Unlike many missing person cases, the search for Heather was officially wrapped up rather quickly, with law enforcement adamant that they have already tracked down the man who kidnapped Heather and can confirm that her attacker is no longer a threat. But Sarah isn't convinced. For decades now, Sarah has argued that the search for the man who attacked her vulnerable daughter, it isn't over, or at least she doesn't believe that it should be. With so many questions left unanswered, Sarah is on a mission to ensure that her daughter gets justice. Sarah Teague holds beliefs that her daughter's case was mishandled by the local police, deceiving Heather's loved ones and the public, blaming the wrong man for the crime, concealing evidence, and failing to truly find out what happened to Heather. In fact, Sarah is so upset at the way the investigation into her daughter's disappearance has been handled that she has even gone so far as to get the courts involved. We are going to unravel some of the questions that pop up with this case. But with that being said, will we ever really know the truth? And will Heather ever be found?
But first, we must warn you that today's episode includes discussions of suicide and threats of violence. If you're sensitive to any of these topics, you may want to skip this episode and tune in next week instead.
For now, let's go back to the tail end of summer of '95 to when Sarah Teague's real-life nightmare began. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. On August 26, 1995, Heather Teague relaxed along Newburgh Beach, which has been reported by the Courier and press to be a rough and thin slice of sand on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River. Heather has been described by the news outlets as being a Webster County woman filled with notebooks, with poetry, and spent her high school years as a popular cheerleader. To me, that describes someone with a big personality and a big heart. Just 23 years old at the time, Heather should have had a bright and fulfilling future ahead of her. It's clear she was loved by those around her, especially her mother, Sarah Teague, who has made her love and devotion for her daughter known to the public ever since. Sadly, Heather would never make it home that day. Even now, 30 years later, Sarah remains on the hunt for her daughter. As to this day, authorities have yet to find Heather Teague, dead or alive. However, we do have some insight into what happened to Heather that day, thanks to a man who told investigators what he witnessed that day, or at least that's what law enforcement has stated.
Wait, the telescope guy?
Yes. There are arguably reasons to be skeptical of the account, but we'll get to that a little later in this episode. According to the records found in the FBI's online vault, which offers access to FBI files that have been released to the public, the witness spotted Heather sunbathing on the rural isolated beach at around noon that day. Though he was on the Indiana side of the river, the witness observed the afternoon unfolding on the Kentucky side, where Heather was, through his telescope. This allowed him full view of the tragic turn Heather's beach day would take, as the witness stated that a white male with dark brown, bushy hair and a beard emerged from the trees behind Heather and approached the vulnerable young woman. According to this witness, the man put a gun against her head, forced Heather into the wooded area with him. And as far as we know, that was the last time Heather was seen by anyone but her attacker.
It's hard to believe that this telescope guy saw all of this coincidentally.
Mm-hmm. Now, FBI records state that there was some delay between when the witness observed the attack and when he actually reported it to the Kentucky State Police Department.
But the witness, however, denied this and was upset after learning that there was no record of his call, insisting that he reported the incident immediately after it happened. And the records go on to further detail the beginning of the investigation, sharing that when responding officers arrived at the beach where Heather was last seen, they discovered footprints that led to the woods, along with a bikini bottom and a towel. Officers also found Heather's car, which helped them identify Heather Teague as the young woman who had been attacked. Tragically, despite the use of dogs, divers, helicopters, and other equipment, officers were unable to locate Heather.
Now, I hesitated when deciding if it was best to include this next part. It is included in the FBI records, but it's unclear the reason for that. It's widely accepted that Heather didn't disappear due to her own choosing. Someone dragged her away from her life, though it remains unclear of exactly who the perpetrator was and why they would do such a horrible thing to an innocent young woman. But the records directly state, victim has a history of drug abuse and strange erratic behavior and was reported missing 2 weeks prior. Victim was located several days later and advised she was just running around.
But still, this doesn't justify, diminish, or invalidate Heather's tragic disappearance. To me, this just sounds like victim blaming.
Yeah, it does. Now, there are a couple of reasons I can think of knowing this type of information as potentially useful. If Heather was struggling with certain things, those challenges could make her even more vulnerable. If she was or is still alive, her vulnerabilities could be used against her, keeping her from getting free from her abductor and unable to get the help that she needed to return home to her loving family. The other justification relates to Sarah's suspicions, which we'll get to very soon, I promise. For now, as we return to the FBI's records, they include a clipping from a newspaper that covered the case days after Heather's disappearance, reporting, state police said the alleged abductor was reported to be white, about 6 feet tall, and was estimated to weigh 210 to 230 pounds. He had bushy dark brown hair and a beard. He was wearing jean shorts and black athletic shoes. A dark pickup truck was seen at the beach. It wasn't a lot to go on, but it wasn't long before investigators had a suspect in mind.
So a few things off the top of my head. Who wears cut-off jean shorts and athletic shoes? Like, those things are not clocking.
I know, like, the guy in my head is like some, like, caveman in the woods, like this wooded man.
Exactly.
Now, in fact, Evansville police, they had pulled over a man who matched the exact description of the suspect earlier that year. So in February of 1995, this routine traffic stop took an ominous turn when officers found 2 guns, 2 knives, rubber gloves, duct tape, and rope in the man's vehicle.
In that person, 30-year-old Marvin Ray Dill.
Now, according to law enforcement, more tips came in that gave even more weight to the investigators' suspicions. One of the most notable came from a Kentucky resident who was recording crop damage left by vandals the day Heather was missing. It was on August 26th, just after noon, he coincidentally caught footage of Heather's 1990 red Nissan and a red and white Bronco that was parked on opposite sides of a gravel road, about 200 yards apart. What law enforcement didn't believe was a coincidence was the fact that Marvin had a vehicle that matched that exact description.
And then came the calls. 6 to 8 different people confirmed Marvin matched the description seen through the telescope.
So for the Kentucky State Police, the puzzle pieces were all pointing towards Marvin Ray Dill. But Marvin's attorney, William Polk, warned them. He said Marvin didn't match the witness description. He was shorter, lighter, clean-shaven, and bald.
Polk even warned them Marvin might take his own life if they surrounded him. He begged police to let him talk to Marvin first, but they didn't.
And on September 1st of 1995, 5 days after Heather disappeared, police, they moved in. Marvin was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
So no trial, no confession, and still no Heather.
Trooper Larry Abel of the Kentucky State Police explained that though there was no past connection between Marvin and Heather leading up to the day of the alleged abduction, Marvin remained law enforcement's primary suspect. Abel is reported as stating, "We can't rule out other people, but we feel this is the man." However, Sarah has since gone on to point out several issues with this assumption, as she's not the only one. The first inconsistency that seems like it should have been very obvious right from the start. According to Sarah and several others, though there was a time when Marvin could have matched the description given of the bearded man with bushy dark brown hair who grabbed Heather at the beach that day, Marvin's appearance had since changed. Most notably, Sarah has stated that Marvin completely shaved his hair and beard off months before Heather disappeared. And as proof of this, Sarah has a photo of Marvin that was taken a month before Heather's disappearance, in which Marvin is noticeably balding, having very little hair on his head or beard, not even close to the description provided by the witness. Many people who knew Marvin before his death have also confirmed this as well, including Marvin's attorney, who had warned the Kentucky State Police that Marvin didn't fit the suspect's description before they barreled ahead with their plans that night. Sarah has stated that she believes the investigators must have seen Marvin's license photo taken back when he had all that hair, and they stuck with him as their main suspect, even once they inevitably realized that they made a mistake. And to note, the Kentucky State Police only seem to focus on releasing old photos of Marvin to the press, ones that were taken back when he still had a full head of hair, rather than pictures that accurately represent the way Marvin looked around the time Heather was abducted. It turns out the discrepancies regarding the suspect's description was just the beginning of what I imagine has become one of the most intense fights of Sarah's life. Law enforcement officials insisted they've looked at alternative possibilities, followed up on other leads, and generally give the impression that they did a thorough investigation to Heather Teague's disappearance before concluding that Marvin Dill abducted the young woman. Following Marvin's death, Kentucky State Police seem to believe that there's not much more that they can do to get answers for Heather's family. In an interview with the host of the TM podcast, Sarah shared her frustrations with how persistent law enforcement officials were in seemingly trying to get her to stop searching for answers about what happened to her daughter.
I mean, why would she do that?
Exactly. Sarah stated, "At 2 months, this lieutenant told me, take her missing posters down. Marvin Dill took her, he killed himself, and took his secrets to the grave. But Sarah wasn't about to give up on her hunt for answers. In fact, she was really just getting started. A true testament to the power of a mother's love and just how far one woman will go to fight to ensure that her daughter has a chance at getting justice. Aside from the issue with Marvin not matching the description of the suspect, Sarah also became suspicious of the witness who reported watching Heather's abduction through his telescope, and how everything to do with that witness has been handled by law enforcement. So as Sarah would eventually find out, despite the witness's claims that he called 911 immediately after witnessing Heather's abduction, there seemed to be no record of this call. Sarah has since shared that the witness later told her that he had radioed the trooper to the abduction site. This, of course, led Sarah to question how a civilian could radio a trooper in the first place.
Honestly, why would a civilian who randomly was peeping through a telescope across the lake at this exact moment have a radio to contact a trooper?
Exactly. Sarah began to suspect the witness himself and how the police handled his account.
And that also makes me circle back to those earlier mentions of Heather. The supposed erratic behavior of drug use. I mean, maybe that's how she ended up in contact with law enforcement in the first place. I mean, it's all speculation, but it's what led Sarah to accuse police of hiding critical parts of the truth.
Yeah, it's all speculation at this point. But regardless of what the truth is, Sarah believes that law enforcement agencies that were responsible for finding out what happened to her daughter have continued to hide and lie about important details of the case, resulting in a botched investigation.
Yeah, I mean, instead of backing down and just accepting that there wasn't anything that she could do to change things, Sarah stood strong and she advocated for herself and her daughter.
Yeah, she requested access to information on her daughter's case, even as law enforcement continued to fight against her. And in 2007, Sarah even went so far as to have Heather legally declared dead in order to fulfill the requirements for obtaining the FBI's investigative file on the investigation into Heather's disappearance. This allowed Sarah to access important reports, leads, and sources, though some of the information was redacted. But Sarah wasn't done yet. And after enough pressure being pushed on them from Sarah's relentless pursuit of justice, the Kentucky State Police eventually allowed Sarah and her lawyer Chip Adams to listen to the recording of the witness's 911 call. Adams and Sarah have both insisted that the state police allowed them to listen to this 911 call on two separate occasions. The first time was in March of 2008, and the second was February of 2016. Adams and Sarah, they both agreed that the police played them two very different versions of what was supposed to be the same 911 call.
But Sarah believes the second call, the one mentioning the suspect might have been wearing mosquito netting over his face, was fabricated to match Marvin's bald, clean-shaven look.
Yeah, and the detail about the mosquito netting was seemingly coincidentally left out of all the initial descriptions of the suspect reported by news outlets. Increasingly suspicious, Sarah moved forward with an open records request in May of 2016, which the Kentucky State Police denied. Sarah fought back by filing a successful lawsuit against the Kentucky State Police in 2016. This decision that was upheld by the Kentucky Court of Appeals in January of 2018, ruling that the state police had wrongfully kept records on Heather's case from Sarah and therefore should pay for Sarah's legal costs. And over the years, as Sarah has uncovered more information about her daughter's disappearance and the questionable investigation that followed, her hard work has begun to pay off. As reported by Courier and Press, in May of 2024, Commonwealth attorney Herb McKee Jr. confirmed that Ramsey Dallum with the Kentucky Attorney's General Department of Criminal Investigation will now handle any prosecution that arises from this case. And after learning about the lack of effort that had been put into testing done on the items that had been found at the crime scene when they were sent to a lab in Florida back in 2022, Sarah received even more hopeful news.
In February of 2025, an official with the Kentucky Attorney General's Office of Victim Advocacy assured Sarah that several of Heather's things were going to be shipped to Bodie Technology in Virginia, giving them a second chance to find answers that the first disastrous attempt might have missed. At the beginning of March, Kentucky State Police Trooper Corey King confirmed that Heather's bathing suit bottoms had been sent out for testing.
And this is crazy, right? I mean, nearly 30 years later.
Right.
And also, on July 26th, 2024, Sarah took her fight a step further by filing a lawsuit against the Kentucky State Police and the FBI, seeking $29 million in compensation.
Dang.
The lawsuit also accuses KSP and the FBI of conspiracy to interfere with civil rights, failure to train and supervise their officers and agents, negligence, wrongful death, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But Sarah wasn't content at just holding Kentucky State Police and the FBI accountable for the way they mishandled Heather's case, potentially ruining their chance to bring Heather home safely. As of this year, Sarah has decided to at least try to include several other defendants in the lawsuit. 6 Kentucky State Police officers, a retired special agent for the FBI, 2 additional Kentucky state agencies, and the man who claimed to have witnessed Heather's abduction were all included in a filing from April 1st, 2025.
As far as we know, the additional defendants have yet to be officially approved by the judge yet, and the Kentucky State Police, on the other hand, have asked the judge to dismiss the case entirely. However, Sarah remains confident that the judge will ultimately rule in her favor, convinced that the evidence she's gathered is undeniable.
We'll keep an eye out for updates as the legal process continues. Sadly, at the time of recording this episode, Heather Teague remains a missing person. During her interview with the host of the TM podcast 5 years ago, Sarah said that some people still believe that Heather is alive, sharing the speculation that it's possible her daughter was sold. It's the kind of possibility that's both disturbing, yet allows for hope, one that's difficult even to consider. On August 26, 2015, the 20th anniversary of Heather's abduction, Sarah held a rally to share details she had uncovered about her daughter's case with the public. And during this rally, Sarah stated, quote, "After searching for Heather for all these years, one thing is certain. What we were told happened is not what did happen. The news media repeated false and misleading statements from the Kentucky State Police investigators that convinced most people that the suspect, Marty Dill, fit the description, and then he killed himself. So the case is closed. This is not true. In fact, many of the Kentucky State Police's facts are probably false. Some reporters questioned Kentucky State Police investigators, but then let the official story prevail. KSP misled us and deceived us, and the public doesn't realize it," unquote. And so, now that we've gone over the official story, along with the inconsistencies that Sarah has uncovered, doing our best to share her side of the story, we're curious about what you think about the investigation into Heather Teague's disappearance. Do you believe that law enforcement got it right? Do you think that Marvin Dill is responsible for Heather's disappearance and that it only makes sense that his death effectively ended the investigation? Or do you stand with Sarah? Does this case deserve a more thorough investigation? We would love to hear your thoughts on this case, so please take a moment to leave a comment and share this episode on social media so we can bring more awareness to a case that's been plagued with unanswered questions for decades. As always, we're so grateful for our Crime Salad Patreon and Apple subscribers. Your support means the world to us and allows us to keep this podcast going. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. We appreciate this opportunity to share what we learn about these cases with all of you.
And also make sure to check out our weekly Weird History segment.
Ooh, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I love it.
It's creepy, but still crunchy. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next week for another deep dive into the stories that need to be told.